The delay announcement felt like a personal affront. Not the words themselves. The robotic, disembodied voice of the MTA was incapable of inflection, let alone malice, but the fact of it. 23 minutes, an eternity when measured against the precise, unwavering schedule I'd curated for my life. 23 minutes stolen from the 117 I had allocated for the evening's archival review. 23 minutes disrupting the careful equilibrium I maintained between the sprawling, chaotic city outside and the ordered, predictable world within the library walls. And, to be candid, the 23 minutes delay to be the sole event between my shift and making a precise cup of chamomile before a precise 8 hours and 13 minutes of sleep. It was, I reflected, a symptom of a larger, systemic failure. A breakdown in the meticulously crafted machinery of urban existence. A crack, however small, in the facade of order that I, and countless others like me, relied upon to navigate the daily deluge of, well, everything. I found myself mentally cataloguing the delay, filing it away alongside other instances of civic inefficiency. A malfunctioning traffic light on 38th, a pothole on 5th Avenue that had gone unaddressed for weeks. Data points in an ever-expanding archive of urban decay. My eyes drifted across the platform. 42nd Street Bryant Park, a stone's throw from the Stephen A. Schwartzman building. My sanctuary. Even from here I could almost picture the rows upon rows of meticulously organized books, manuscripts and maps. A universe of knowledge contained within those imposing Beaux-Arts walls. A universe far more comprehensible than the one I currently inhabited, waiting for a delayed B train. The platform was unusually deserted for this hour. Typically, even late evenings saw a steady stream of commuters, tourists, and the city's usual nocturnal denizens. Tonight, however, there was an unsettling emptiness. A few scattered figures stood at a distance, their faces obscured by the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights overhead. One figure, near the far end of the platform, caught my eye. Tall and thin, almost skeletal, he was dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned conductor's uniform, complete with a peaked cap. An eccentric, certainly, but not entirely out of place in this city of infinite peculiarities. I dismissed him as a harmless oddity, a minor anomaly in the otherwise predictable flow of urban life. I returned my attention to the delay, my irritation simmering. I reached into my briefcase, a worn leather satchel that had accompanied me on countless commutes, and retrieved my pocket watch. A habit, checking the time. A compulsion, perhaps. But it provided a sense of control, a tangible measure of the fleeting moments. The watch, a gift from my grandfather, was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. A silver hunter case with intricate engravings, the hands moving with a smooth, silent precision. 9:57 p.m. The delay was now officially 24 minutes. The train finally arrived, its approach heralded not by the usual ear-splitting screech, but by a surprisingly muted rumble, like a distant, approaching storm. The cars were the standard R160 model, nothing to distinguish them from any other train on the B line. I boarded, finding a seat near the middle of the car. Relief washed over me, a momentary reprieve from the mounting frustration of the evening. There were only a handful of other passengers. An older man, his face hidden behind a newspaper that appeared to be from a different decade, judging by the faded print and outdated advertisements. A businessman, engrossed in something on his tablet, his face illuminated by the blue light. A younger man dressed in what looked like athletic wear, fidgeting nervously, his eyes darting around the car. Ordinary enough, I thought, mentally assigning them to categories. The antiquarian, the executive, the agitated, an archivist's habit, even outside the library walls. As I settled into my seat, my hand brushed against my wallet. I pulled it out, and a folded piece of paper slipped free. It was an old note, creased and faded, from my brother Nathaniel. A pang of something hit me. Guilt? Regret? We hadn't spoken in years, not since his departure. Nathaniel had always been the unconventional one, the black sheep of the family. A brilliant mind, certainly, but one that veered too far into the realm of the theoretical, the fringe. He'd been a physicist, specializing in, well, I'd never fully understood it. Something about multidimensional transit systems, hidden pathways beneath the city, intersections beyond human comprehension. I unfolded the note, my eyes scanning the erratic handwriting. Most of it was gibberish, equations, diagrams, and rambling pronouncements about the illusory nature of linear reality. But one phrase, underlined multiple times, jumped out at me: Andromeda Terminal. Below it, a warning, scrawled in a frantic hand. If you ever hear the words Andromeda Terminal, run. Don't ask why. Don't wait. Just get off the train. I scoffed. A dry, humorless sound. Nathaniel's paranoia, preserved on a scrap of paper. A relic of a fractured relationship and a mind that had strayed too far from the grounded reality I cherished. I refolded the note, tucking it back into my wallet, a faint unease settling in the pit of my stomach. A silly, irrational feeling, I told myself. A ghost of a brother I hadn't been able to save from his own delusions. The train began to move, smoothly at first, then with increasing speed. I glanced at my watch. 10:03 p.m. We were already behind schedule. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to shut out the world and focus on the rhythm of the train. But the rhythm was off. The train wasn't slowing down for the usual stops. It was accelerating, gathering momentum. I opened my eyes, a sudden wave of alarm igniting within me. I looked around the car. The other passengers remained in their positions, seemingly oblivious to the increasing speed. The businessman was still tapping away at his tablet. The older man was still hidden behind his newspaper. The younger man was still fidgeting, but none of them seemed to notice anything amiss. "Excuse me," I said, addressing the businessman. "Is this an express train? I don't recall." He glanced up, his expression blank, uncomprehending. "Express?" he repeated, as if the word held no meaning. Then he simply returned to his tablet, dismissing me without a further word. My unease escalated. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I needed to ask the conductor to find out what was happening. But as I looked towards the front of the car, I noticed something strange. The view outside the windows. It wasn't the usual blur of passing lights and concrete walls. It was distorted, stretched, like looking through a warped lens. The familiar cityscape was melting away, replaced by a dizzying, swirling expanse of nothingness. Not darkness exactly, but a void, punctuated by streaks of light. Then, the announcement. The conductor's voice, calm and measured, filled the car. "Next stop, the Andromeda Terminal." Andromeda. Nathaniel's note flashed in my mind, a childish fantasy, a delusion. It couldn't be. I grabbed the emergency brake lever above my head, a desperate, instinctive reaction. But it wouldn't budge. It was locked, sealed. I looked outside again. We had left the tunnels behind. The city was gone. The buildings that I'd considered fixed points had all disappeared, replaced by a dizzying infinity. My breath hitched in my throat, a strangled gasp trapped between disbelief and a rising tide of panic. The stars, bright and close, streaked past the windows, forming trails of light that seemed to pierce the fabric of reality. I pressed my hand against the glass, the cool surface offering a pathetically inadequate grounding to the impossible scene unfolding before me. My meticulously ordered world, the world of archives and schedules, of predictable commutes and chamomile tea, had shattered. I had to understand. I needed to understand. My archivist's mind, trained to categorize, analyze, and find order in chaos, rebelled against the sheer absurdity of the situation. This wasn't a missed stop, a mechanical failure, or even a particularly elaborate hallucination. This was something else entirely. "What's happening?" I demanded, my voice cracking with a tremor I couldn't control. I turned to the other passengers, desperate for some shared acknowledgement of the impossible, some sign that I wasn't alone in this descent into madness. The businessman, still glued to his tablet, didn't even look up. The older man with the newspaper, however, lowered it slightly, revealing a pair of eyes that were unsettlingly calm. Not the vacant calm of the businessman, but a deep, knowing stillness. He didn't speak, merely regarded me with an expression that bordered on pity. My attention shifted to the younger man, the one who had been fidgeting earlier. He was now visibly shaking, his eyes wide with terror, mirroring my own internal state. He was muttering to himself, words I couldn't quite make out, but the sheer panic in his voice was unmistakable. You see it too, don't you? I stammered, approaching him cautiously. The stars. This isn't normal. He flinched, shrinking away from me as if I were a threat. Not safe, he whispered, his voice distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. His mouth seemed to move slightly out of sync with the sounds he was making. Turn back before. The word looped, repeating itself in a glitching, broken cadence before abruptly cutting off. He was clearly terrified, but also damaged. Something about him was profoundly wrong. Not just his fear, but his very presence. He seemed unstable, as if he was flickering in and out of existence. My eyes fell on the smiling passenger, the unnatural grin plastered to his face. I could have sworn the corners of his mouth had twitched upwards slightly, as if in amusement at my growing unease. He did not move, but appeared the image of pure, unadulterated calm. I needed to see the conductor. I needed to understand what was happening, and he, with his cryptic announcement and his outdated uniform, seemed to be the key to this puzzle. As I passed the conductor's booth, a small enclosed space at the front of the car, I noticed his pocket watch. It was lying on a small shelf, seemingly unattended. I paused for a second. Then, driven by a desperate need for answers, I reached out and picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, the metal cold and smooth against my palm. The face of the watch was not a traditional clock face, but a series of concentric circles filled with strange, shifting symbols. And the hands, they weren't moving forward, they were moving backward. A sudden lurch of the train threw me off balance. I stumbled, dropping the watch. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing loud in the otherwise silent car. I scrambled to retrieve it, my fingers brushing against the metal. "Looking for something, Mr. Lockwood?" The conductor's voice, calm and measured, startled me. He was standing behind me, seemingly having appeared out of nowhere, his blue eyes, devoid of pupils, fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. What is this place?" I stammered, clutching the watch tightly in my hand. "Where are we going?" "The Andromeda Terminal," he replied. "The end of the line." "But that's impossible," I protested. "Andromeda it's a galaxy, millions of light years away." A faint smile flashed across the conductor's lips. "Distance is a relative concept, Mr. Lockwood, as is time." "Relative?" I repeated. My mind, trained on the concrete, the factual, the provable, struggled to grasp his statement. "But the laws of physics, speed of light..." The conductor chuckled. "Laws, Mr. Lockwood, are often written for those who lack the imagination to break them, or perhaps the proper vehicle." He gestured vaguely around the train car, a sweeping motion that encompassed the journey, the unblinking passengers, the star-streaked void outside. I tightened my grip on the watch, its backward-moving hands a tangible representation of the distorted reality I now inhabited. This watch," I said, holding it up. "What is it? What do these symbols mean?" He glanced at the watch, his blue eyes narrowing slightly. "A chronometer of sorts, tuned to a different frequency." He reached out, his long, thin fingers closing around the watch. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lockwood, I'm going to have to take that back. It's essential for navigation." The conductor pocketed the watch. "It measures the passage not of time as you understand it, but of distance, dimensional distance." "Dimensional distance." Nathaniel's research, his frantic warnings, it was all starting to coalesce, forming a horrifying picture in my mind. My brother, dismissed as a madman, had been right. He had discovered something, some hidden truth about the universe, and he had tried to warn me. And I, in my arrogance, my adherence to the known and the provable, had ignored him. My brother, Nathaniel Lockwood, he knew about this, didn't he? The conductor's gaze sharpened. Nathaniel, he repeated, the name sounding alien in his measured tones. A persistent passenger. He understood the principles but lacked the discipline. Discipline? I asked, confused. What do you mean? To accept the journey, the conductor said, his eyes locking onto mine. To relinquish control. To embrace the inevitable. He gestured towards the distorted man, still muttering and twitching in his seat. He, for example, fights. He resists. And so he degrades. The implication was chilling. The distorted man, trapped in his loop of terror, was not simply a passenger but a warning. A glimpse of what awaited those who refused to accept the train's destination. He was caught in the process, I realized. But where are we really going? I pressed, desperate for a concrete answer, something to anchor me to some semblance of reality. What is the Andromeda Terminal? The conductor stepped closer. A place of convergence, where realities meet, where timelines intersect, a place of finality. Finality? I repeated, the word echoing the dread that was consuming me. You mean death? The conductor smiled, a slow, unsettling curve of his lips. Death, Mr. Lockwood, is merely another transition, a change of state. The Andromeda Terminal is something more. Suddenly, a voice, smooth and mellifluous, cut through my mounting despair. Mr. Lockwood! It was the smiling passenger. He had risen from his seat, his perfectly pressed suit uncreased, his unnaturally pleasant smile still firmly in place. He moved with a disconcerting grace, his footsteps making no sound on the train car floor. He stopped before me, his presence strangely calming. You seem troubled, he said, his voice a soothing balm, understandably so. This is a significant transition. Transition? I repeated, my eyes flicking back to the conductor, who was watching this exchange with an air of detached amusement. You know what's happening, you're not surprised? The smiling passenger chuckled, a soft, perfectly modulated sound. Surprised, Mr. Lockwood? Oh no, I'm quite familiar with this journey. In fact, you might say I'm part of the process. He extended a hand, his palm open as if offering something. Allow me to introduce myself. You can call me Gabriel. I'm here to help you adjust. I stared at his hand, refusing to take it. Adjust? To what? To being hurtled through space towards oblivion? Gabriel's smile never wavered. Oblivion is such a negative term, Mr. Lockwood. Think of it rather as liberation. Release from the constraints of your limited existence. His words, so carefully chosen, so soothingly delivered, revealed the true emptiness beneath his pleasant facade. There was something profoundly wrong about his perfect composure, his unwavering smile, his unnervingly gentle tone. You're not like the others. You're with the conductor. You work for him. Gabriel inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. The conductor, as you call him, is merely a facilitator. He ensures the smooth operation of the transit system. I, on the other hand, am a recruiter, you might say. I help passengers understand the opportunities that await them at the Andromeda Terminal. Opportunities? I scoffed. What opportunities could possibly exist in a place outside time, a place from which no one returns? Gabriel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. Imagine, Mr. Lockwood, a place unbound by the limitations of your linear reality. A place where time is fluid, where knowledge is infinite, where the fabric of existence can be reshaped according to your desires. He gestured towards the swirling cosmos outside the windows. Out there, Mr. Lockwood, lies not emptiness but potential. The potential to explore universes beyond your wildest dreams. to unravel the deepest mysteries of existence. His words were seductive, weaving a pattern of possibilities that tugged at the edges of my archivist's soul. The lure of knowledge, the promise of understanding the universe's grand design. It was a powerful temptation, but I saw the trap. He did not offer the real desires of family, of humanity, and of a home, only the cold and distant reality of the cosmos. "You're lying," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You're trying to trick me, to make me accept whatever this is." Gabriel's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "There's no need for trickery, Mr. Lockwood. The choice is yours. You can resist like your friend over there." He gestured towards the distorted man who was now huddled in his seat, rocking back and forth, lost in his private hell. "Or you can embrace the inevitable, accept the invitation." "I choose to go home," I said, finding some resolve. Gabriel sighed, then straightened. "I am sorry, Mr. Lockwood, but your home is already far, far behind." The words, though delivered with that same unnerving politeness, felt like a final, crushing blow. Yet strangely, within that despair, a flicker of clarity ignited. It wasn't hope, not exactly, more like understanding. I looked at Gabriel, at his perfect, unchanging smile, and I saw him, not as a powerful agent of some cosmic entity, but as a prisoner, just like the rest of us, trapped in his role, his script, his endless cycle of recruitment. I saw the distorted man, a horrifying vision of resistance worn down to nothing. I saw the old man with the newspaper, passively accepting, eternally observing. And I saw myself, caught between those two extremes. My hand went to my pocket, to the worn leather wallet containing Nathaniel's note. The note that had seemed like the ravings of a madman, but now, with star-streaked void rushing past the windows, felt like the only truth I had left. Nathaniel hadn't just theorized about these hidden pathways, he'd understood them. He'd understood the nature of the train, not as a physical vehicle, but as something else. And that's when it clicked. The conductor's watch, the backward-moving hands, dimensional distance. It wasn't about traveling through space, but between states of being, between potential and actuality, between the infinite possibilities of what could be and the singular reality of what is. The train, I realized, wasn't fueled by some exotic energy source. It was fueled by us. By our resistance, our longing for a different outcome, our desperate clinging to the timelines we believed we were supposed to inhabit. It was a parasite, feeding on the unfulfilled potential of every passenger who boarded, every passenger who fought against the inevitable. And the Andromeda terminal? It wasn't a destination, but a release. A point of convergence, as the conductor had said, where all those unfulfilled potentials were resolved. Not destroyed, perhaps, but integrated, absorbed. I looked at Gabriel, and in his expectant eyes I saw a reflection of my own fear, and I did something he clearly didn't anticipate. I stopped fighting. Not physically. There was nothing to fight against, not anymore. But mentally, emotionally. I let go of the library, of the meticulously ordered shelves, of the comforting scent of old paper and leather. I let go of my routines, of my precise schedules, of my carefully constructed world of predictable certainties. I let go of the guilt I carried for Nathaniel, for not believing him, for not saving him. I let go of the desire to go home, to return to a life that, I now understood, was already gone. I didn't embrace the opportunities Gabriel had offered, those seductive illusions of cosmic power and infinite knowledge. I didn't embrace the void, the star-streaked nothingness that rushed past the windows. I embraced the present moment. The reality of the train, of Gabriel, of the distorted man, of the old man with the newspaper, of the backward-moving watch, of the journey itself. I accepted it, not with resignation, but with a sense of unsettling clarity. It was a conscious act of surrender, not to the train, but to the fundamental absurdity of existence, a release of all resistance, all expectation, all desire. And as I did, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no blinding flash of light, no ear-splitting crash. Instead, there was a gradual unwinding. The star-streaked void outside the windows began to flicker like a faulty projection. The colors became less vibrant, the streaks less defined. Gabriel's perfect smile faltered, his expression shifting from polite confidence to confusion. He took a step back, his form becoming slightly transparent, like a ghost image superimposed on reality. The distorted man stopped muttering, his body ceasing its frantic twitching. He looked up, his eyes for a fleeting moment clear and focused, meeting mine with a hint of understanding. Then, he too began to fade, his form dissolving into the air. The old man with the newspaper simply lowered his paper. He nodded once, a slow, deliberate movement, then vanished, leaving only an empty seat. The conductor appeared, his blue eyes wide, not with their usual calm detachment, but with something akin to alarm. What? What have you done?" he stammered, his voice losing its measured cadence. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The train car was dissolving around me, the metal and glass becoming translucent, then disappearing entirely. The last thing I saw was the conductor's face, his expression contorted in a mixture of disbelief and fear. Then he too was gone, and I was standing on the platform. 42nd Street, Bryant Park. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead, the familiar grime on the tiled walls, the distant rumble of approaching trains. It was normal. I looked at my watch. 9:56 p.m. 1 minute before the initial delay announcement. 1 minute before my life had been irrevocably altered. The delay announcement came over the loudspeaker, the voice announcing a 23-minute delay for the B train. I felt a shudder run through me, not of fear, but of something else. Recognition, understanding. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the worn leather of my wallet. I didn't need to open it. I knew Nathaniel's note was still there, tucked away, a reminder of the journey I had taken, of the reality that lay hidden beneath the surface of the everyday. I turned and walked away from the platform, away from the approaching train, away from the carefully constructed order of my life. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I would do. But I knew one thing. I would never look at a subway train or at the world the same way again. The ride was over for me, but I carry it, and that is something I can never unlearn. I stepped out into the humid night and took a long breath. It felt real, and maybe that was all that mattered.